Hi, it's Sandy Parker, and welcome to Crafting for Almost Everyone. Well, my cousin is new to crafting, and she's starting making cards. And she and I went shopping together, and we were picking out an ink for her, a black ink to start with. And I started thinking about the black inks I have and how it's so confusing to know what inks to use for what. So what I thought I would do is go through the black inks, and not just go through them, but go through them on Georgia Pacific paper, on Recollections paper from Michael. Oh, sorry, the Georgia Pacific paper was from Walmart. The Michael's, it was the 110-pound Recollections, and the other Walmart Georgia Pacific was 110 as well. A Nina Classic Crest 80-pound Solar White, and Fabriano 140-pound hot press watercolor paper. I'm also going to use a watercolor pen or watercolor on it. I'm going to use a regular water-based marker and an alcohol-based marker, as well as just stamping them so that you can really see the image and know how dark it is and how it stands up to all of these things. So let's get started first. And let me go through the cost of the papers first. I have them in order, of least expensive to most expensive. The least expensive is the Georgia Pacific that you get at Walmart. It's 150 sheets of, again, 110 pounds for $5.48. And you can get that in almost any Walmart. If you can't get it in your Walmart, you can go on Walmart.com and have them send it to your store. Just thought I'd tell you that, and that doesn't cost you anything. Michael's 110-pound Recollections is $14.99 for 100 sheets. Now, I did not give you any coupons on my prices because I didn't think that was fair, because what if you got a lesser or more of a coupon? I wanted to make sure it was like apples to apples. So that's the Recollections. The Nina Classic Crest 80-pound Solar White, for a pack of 250 at Amazon, I found it for $36. Now, you might find it less expensive somewhere else, but again, I'm just giving you where I bought them when I did buy them. The only one I did not have a price for where I bought it was the Fabriano 140-pound hot press watercolor paper. I bought it at AC Moore, but they don't have online prices, so I couldn't tell you what it was. But at Amazon, they charge $24.95 for 50 sheets. I know I paid a lot less than that at AC Moore, but again, it's all about the coupons. And I'll go through prices on the inks as well. They're pretty comparable to each other, So let's get started. Now, the stamp I chose is this little butterfly stamp because it has open areas and darker areas so that you'd be able to see if it smears with different inks or not. And I chose to use one of my less expensive alcohol-based markers, which is this Sharpie, and I'm going to be using my watercolors. I thought I would just use regular, hold on, I want to get me my pen. I'm going to use Stampin Up marker in a pink color, so it's different. I better change that to a different color completely. Let me go with lighter bluish purple so that you can really tell the difference. Oh, I'm going with lighter blue, completely off the track. And then with our watercolors, I think I'm just going to go with watercolor, just my standard watercolors. So I will get everything together and get all this out of your way, and I'll be back. So right off the bat, we're going to start with our Ranger Black Tie ink. This is a waterproof dye ink, and this is, I'm going to make sure that I get a good stamped image on it. I'm stamping on a pad of paper as well as a cutting mat and a few other things, so it's got a good soft base for it to be stamped on. I'll stamp it on that, and then I'm going to stamp it on Recollections. Whoops. here's my plan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go off camera and stamp them all once on each of the pages, so you don't have to see the process of stamping. You'll be able to see the colors. Then I'll come back after I've done that, and we'll do the other processes so that you can kind of see what it, how it fares. So let me do that, and we'll pick it up when I'm done. All right, so the first one we're going to work on is the Ranger Black Tie. It's a dye-based ink and it's waterproof. It stamps not a vivid black, and it has a very hard, the pad when you stamp on it is hard. I found that to be the case with a few of them, and I thought I wrote that down. There, I did on that one. It's definitely a very, very hard pad to stamp on. So if you have any problems with your hands, if you're going to stamp a lot, these are going to be difficult. I'll tell you when I get to one that's not as difficult to stamp with. So I'm going to use alcohol marker first, and I'm using a Sharpie, and we're going to see if it smears, and you can see the smear on that. I don't know if, right away you can tell that this is not good for alcohol. So I'm going to say no for alcohol right off the bat on that. Then let's look at our water-based marker, and this is just, I said, a Stampin' Up marker, and I'm going to use that on the bottom part of these, and I want to make sure, I think that's too dark for you to really see it well. I'm going to get a little lighter color. And so we have consistency. I want to do it into the center section. It's still pretty dark. I'm going to have to go lighter. You can see it, but it's not as light as I want it to be. I think I'll go for maybe a yellow. This does not, it did not blur at all. It did a nice job with that. Now let's go to actual watercolor, and we'll just do some watercoloring over here and see how it does with watercolor. So far, so good. The edges are nice and clean when you stamp it. I think as far as stamping goes, it's not a dark ink, but it's certainly fine, and they're right about it being waterproof. So I would say it's good for anything but alcohol inks. And we wanted to see if paper made a difference in how inks performed. So here it is on the Michael's Recollections, and fine with that. Still smears. It's still no for the alcohol marker, and watercolor, it's fine for that. And let's go to Nina Classic White. The reason I did this is because people always talk about how it makes such a big difference what paper you use, and so I figured I would see, like if it's more expensive paper, will it stamp better? Will it look better? Will you see a difference in the stamped image? So once I smear this around, we'll look at all four of the options for it, and you can decide for yourself if you hate it or love it, if there's a difference. If it's more black on a different cardstock than it is on than on another. Okay, so here it is in all four, and I'm going to put them from least expensive on the bottom. Okay, let me see. I might have to put two of them side by side for you. Here are all four papers. As far as the color image goes, I don't know if you can see. I want to make sure I'm in frame. As far as the color goes, I don't notice any difference on these two, but I do think that on the Nina it is just a little bit darker. Maybe no, it's not. they're all pretty much the same. Maybe you can tell on your screens, but that's all 4 of them on all 4 different pages, this being the least expensive and these being the most expensive. This being obviously watercolor paper, so you wouldn't use this for your standard stamping, but I wanted to include it because I wanted to show the difference. So let's go on to the Memento Tuxedo Black. Get that one out of the way. That's what this looks like, and we'll see what how it works. Now I don't see any smearing with the alcohol at all, but I might be dreaming. I'll make sure. On the other hand, I think it does smear with the water-based. We'll see what it does with, I don't know. We'll let that dry a little bit and see what it does. I'm going to move that out of the way now. Put on that one, and this one, and that one. Water marker. It definitely smears with the water marker. Definitely smears with a water marker. Let's check out the Copic on this paper. Fine, fine, fine. Okay. As far as being a really dark ink, I think that it did stamp darker on certain. Maybe I'm losing my mind, but it seems like it's darker on some of these than it is on others. But again, I'm going to let you make that decision as far as whether you think it's darker or not. I'll reserve my judgment for at the end. So let's go on to Gina K, and that's what her packaging looks like. Oh, and here's how you get, some of these packaging are a little bit tricky to open. This is one of them. You kind of have to stick your nail under the edge to get it open. That's just my recommendation on that. If I were you, that's what I would do. So that's Gina K and what her packaging looks like. And let's see how she does with Copics. So far, I think this one smeared the most for watercolors. So I would say definitely no in watercolor. And this one, it's weird, the water marker really smeared it, but I don't see as much smearing. I would say this is questionable for watercoloring, but definitely a no for using it in with a water marker. I forgot to use the water marker on the Gina K, and it definitely smears that on that one too. No water marker. And no for watercolor. So I don't know, the Copics really smear on it too. I don't know. I'm going to say all the way around no on Copics too. I'm going to say that right there. No on all 3 on that paper. Smeared there. Smeared here. I'd say it's a no on all 3 there. And then on the watercolor paper, definitely smeared. It smeared all 3 on that one too. And this one, oops, I didn't do the marker on that one. Nope, smeared on all 3 on that one too. Okay, so let's go to the next one, which is Simon Says Stamp. and it looks like this. It has the case that you stick your thumb in again with the nail, or you push something, paper clip, or I don't know, something. It's not as hard to get off as the other one. You just kind of, that one you can actually just pull off. I had more trouble. I'll make sure I can't do that with this one. No, after you wiggle it, you can get it off, but at first it's tricky. So I would use, if you can't get it off, use a thumbnail or something thin to pry it off with. But this one, it does come off, no problem. And that's Simon Says stamp. So let's color up everything with it. Okay, so let's look and see what we decide on that. Okay, so you can kind of see how it blurs the lines on the Copics. At least I hope you can. It doesn't do bad on the watercolors, I don't think. Let me look at one of the other ones. The water marker definitely blurs. The watercolor, not so bad on that one. The watercolor blurs. Not as bad on the watercolors though. That's weird. Same with this one. It just seems like it struggles there. It does great with Copics, but it's iffy with the water marker, I would say. And that's, the watercolor, I think it really looks nice. You're going to be the judge. You're looking at all these with me, and I think you can see that, all the pages, there's the watercolor on all 4 of them. And I think it looks fine in the watercolor. But then when you look at the watercolor marker, it looks like it fades it and kind of blurs it. Still, I definitely think that I wouldn't use a watercolor marker on it. Okay. Let's go to Versafine. Now, Versafine Onyx Black, I will tell you, yes, it's in a distressed ink container. I hate the container that Versafine Onyx Black comes in. It has this flappy lid that's just terrible, but I love the ink. So one of my viewers said I should decant it into one of these custom blend containers from Distress, and I love that. So if you have a problem with that lid always slapping you and getting ink all over you, I'd recommend you change to this as well. So I don't want to show that so you get confused about the packaging, because the packaging obviously is not right. Okay, so let's look at the Copics. No problem. So I would say on this one that it's definitely no for Copic and no for water markers. But it seems like it's fine on, I'll show you all 4 of these on the watercolors. The watercolor seems to hold up perfectly. There it is on watercolor paper. Now, on watercolor paper, it didn't seem to smear the image, but it did smear it. You can see the edges aren't as clean anymore. It did smear it on all of these. You can see how it's picked it up. So I guess I would maybe use it for watercolor paper and watercoloring, because watercoloring it did fine with. And make sure that you don't use water markers, because that didn't do as well. You can see that edge there. Okay, let's go on to Tim Holtz Distress Ink. Now this is an ink that's a dye ink, but it's also water reactive, so it's not going to be, obviously it's just going to smear around as soon as I put water on it. So it's something that you want to consider when you're thinking about using it. It's not an ink that you're going to use for just like every situation. It has specific uses, and that's what you're going to want to remember, is that you're not going to be using it for just anything. But I wanted to include it because it is an ink, and it's a dye ink, so I wanted to make sure we had it in there. I'm just filling my watercolors while we're doing this, just to make sure that I still have watercolor going here. Okay, so let's do this is Copics. I think it does fine with Copics, and I'm doing a lot of it just because I wanted to make sure, and that's on watercolor paper. No problem on that either. I'm going to try and get like the antennas, the tricky part, so that you can see if it's going to smear anything. And there's that one. Oh, I'd say Copics are fine with it. Now, this is when we get into problems. It's water reactive, and I have a water-based marker. So I'm only going to do a little bit because they're all going to smear black, or smear that everywhere. Now, I probably don't even have to do this, but I'm going to do it for you just so you can see. It should just move the ink around, but not on the watercolor paper. Let's see what it does on regular paper. Not too bad. It's well, you'll see in a second. I'll show you how it's moving. I gotta get a little more water in my brush. Well, that was too much water. Well, that we can't count that one because I got a little too much water on it. Okay. Well, the watercolor marker is definitely a no. You can see it on each one of the papers. The water still smears. Not as much though. The watercolor, even on the on everything, the water marker, not good. But the watercolors did fine, and the Copics did fine. So I would just say, see that it does smear it a little bit, and this one's really wet. So you can see what it does when it's soaking wet. See how it's smearing the tentacle? But that's when it's completely soaking wet. And this is on the Michaels 110 pound. But on our watercolor paper, no problem at all. So just thought, the reason I'm doing this is I want to make sure that you guys see that different papers might make a difference with your inks. So that's kind of why I'm doing 4 different papers. So let me go to the paper that I write everything on, and we're going to say on this one, no to the watercolor marker, to the water marker, sorry. And use watercolor on watercolor paper. Because, I don't see any blurring at all on those lines. Unless you guys do. I don't. Kind of neat. Anyway, let's go on to the next one. And the next one is our ColorBox Wicked Black. Now this is the one that I was telling you that we're going to have one that's a very soft pad to stamp with. This is a very, very soft pad, and at the end I'm going to give you the prices that I found on each of these ink pads as well. But this is a very soft pad. It's also the first of our archival inks. Archival inks are permanent inks. They're this is an archival dye, but what that means is it will stain you. And it will stain whatever you're using it on, so you have to be very careful when you use archival inks because it'll stain those acrylic stamps of yours. You just have to keep that in mind. We'll use our Copic on it. Well, my camera cut out on me. I apologize for that while I was doing the ColorBox, but I'll finish doing it with you. What I found was that the Copics smeared on the watercolor. Oops, I'm on the backs of everything else. Sorry. and that it's really the Copics were all a smear. The watercolor paper, or the watercolor, excuse me, the paints did fine on all three of these, and then this is the ColorBox. These are all the bottom ones are all ColorBox. Hopefully I'm in picture with all of them. And then this one is ColorBox. And so it did really well with the watercolor on all three. The watercolor marker, it blurs a little bit, especially there you can see it. And in this one, not as much. Let me see on this one, it seems to blur it on that one too. And a little, no, I don't think it's so bad on the watercolor paper. So I would say on this one that I wouldn't use the Copics with it, and I don't think I'd use watercolor markers, because I do see, you know, right in here you can definitely see some blurring. I apologize because I did one more, or maybe part of one more, on the Ranger Jet Black Archival, which is this one. It smeared on the Copics, on the Michaels paper, and on the Georgia Pacific, on the Nina, and really badly on the watercolor paper. As far as the water marker went and the watercolors on watercolor paper, I think they were pretty good. It could be a little smearing on the water marker. Let's look at it on this. No, it definitely smears the water marker. And the watercolor is okay, but the Copics definitely not good. And then the Copics on the Georgia Pacific, not good. The water marker doesn't seem like it blurred that. No, it does on this. I did over here. You can see it's blurring there. It does fine with watercolor though. And then on this paper, yeah, the same thing. So I'd say the only thing, here's my sheet, this is it. The only thing that it worked well with is the watercolor. Okay, so the only one we have left is the StazOn, and this is the Walmart Georgia Pacific, and we're going to do everything up high, and it really blurred the Copics, as did that, which was the Nina and the Michaels. Last but not least, definitely horrible bad on the watercolor. Wow, I wouldn't have thought it would have done that. Now I'm going to do watercolor marker on watercolor paper. A little bit smeary. Let's see how this does. Looks smeary to me. Yeah, a little smeary there too. Not so good. And then we'll go in our watercolors. They're probably dry again because I had to run out for a second. Not too bad on watercolor. Watercoloring so far of all of our media hasn't really been that impacted on what ink we used and what paper we used, which is kind of odd. You would have thought that the watercolors would have really been the smeary thing, but again, here's the StazOn, really blurry, a little blurry, not blurry at all. See it, there it is again. These two are kind of blurry, this one's not. Same with that. And the same with that. So, where's my page where I write everything on? It's right here. So this one is yes to watercolor. Okay, so let's go through. First of all, let me do prices with you, so you have them. The Ranger black tie I found at Simon Says Stamp for $4.99. Yeah, $4.99, and that was this one. The Memento Tuxedo black at Joann's full price was $6.99. The Gina K was $5.99 at Gina K Designs. The Simon Says Stamp is $5.99 at Simon Says Stamp. The Versafine Onyx Black, and I really shouldn't even show you the packaging because you know it's not the right packaging. The Versafine Onyx Black at Joann's full price was $9.99, but you always have a coupon at those places, so I think it would be comparable to the others as far as price. Then the Tim Holtz Distress Ink, also $5.99 at Joann's without the coupon. The ColorBox is the least expensive. It's $4.49, and that's at Joann's. And then our Ranger Archival Jet Black is $5.99, and that was at Joann's. And last but not least was the StazOn, and I found that for $10.99, so I'm not sure if that price is normal or not. The thing about StazOn is, I wanted to make sure I went over this with you. You can use it on plastic, metal, glass, ceramic, laminated paper, coated paper, and leather. And that is the reason most people buy StazOn, is to use it like if you wanted to use a transparency that you're stamping on, like on a shaker card, you can stamp on that really well with StazOn, whereas most of those other ones, really not so much. So it definitely has its place. If you were going to make coasters out of a ceramic tile, you'd use StazOn. So these are the things you would use StazOn on, not material. It doesn't work on material, but it does work on leather. Just want to throw that out to you. So before we kind of go through what we've found, I just wanted to tell you that. So let's go item by item through these so we know what we found. In the Ranger, hold on, I have a page here that I wanted to write this on. On the Ranger black tie, we said that it was good for watercolor and our water marker. So for watercolor, we're going to say the Ranger black tie. On the Memento Tuxedo black, we said it was good for Copics and not for the water, and the watercolor kind of blurry on that as well. For the Gina K, we said no on all three. It smeared everything, and that was one of the first ones that smeared everything. On the Simon Says Stamp, it does well, it seems, with the Copics. I want to get the antlers just because I didn't hit any place that could really blur. No, I think it does fine with Copics. I'm going to say Simon Says Stamp. Simon Says Stamp, Intense Black, because Simon Says Stamp has more than one color of black. Versafine Onyx Black, no to Copics and no to the water marker, but it did, I'm going to change that to water marker and watercolor. I think we said the Ranger black tie. And the Simon Says Stamp. Did we say that one? We said that was questionable. It is a little blurry. And the Simon Says Stamp Intense Black. Then the Versafine Onyx Black, we said no to Copics and no to water markers, but we did like it for watercoloring. We actually did better with watercoloring than we did with just about anything. The Tim Holtz Distress Black Soot, the Copics, I think it did fine with Copics. I don't see any blurring at all. That was the one that has all the watercolor. We said you could use it on watercolor paper. The Distress Ink Black Soot, we said we could use it on watercolor paper. and with Copics. It worked fine. I'll put all this information down below too. Black soot. The ColorBox, definitely no in the Copics and no in the water marker, but it did fine, I think, with the watercolor. So we'll call ColorBox as another one that's fine with that. Then our Ranger Jet Black Archival, no to Copics and no to the water marker, but we thought it was fine on, I'm going to say Ranger Archival too. Jet Black Archival. And we also said, no to the water marker and the Copics, but yes to the watercolor for StazOn as well. So StazOn for watercoloring. Okay, so our Copic recommendations were Simon Says Stamp and Tim Holtz Distress Black Soot. Now I went to some other websites, and the Craft Test Dummies recommendation for Copics were Simon Says Stamp. Yay! The Hero Arts Intense Black and Gina K. That's weird. Let's pull out our Gina K. I don't understand that. That smeared it. And it smeared it there too. I wanted to go over the Versafine Onyx Black one last time, and the reason I want to do that is I forgot to tell you that that is a pigment ink, and that means it's a slower drying ink, so it makes it perfect for embossing. So if you're looking for a really dark black sentiment, I would recommend the Versafine Onyx Black for your sentiments, and then putting a clear embossing powder over it. It'll stay wet long enough to give you the time to put your embossing powder over it and then heat set it. So as far as the watercolors go, they said that Ranger Archival, they called that more of a blue black. When we stamped it, I did not think that the Ranger Archival was a blue black. Here it is. It's the top one. I'll flip all these over so you can see them all. There's the Ranger Archival right there. And they said that they thought that was a blue black. Now, I mean, everything is based on opinion, but I did not see the color difference between other inks. And, I mean, there it is. We can show it beside StazOn, and you can see I don't notice a big difference between it and StazOn. And then here it is on the watercolor paper. There's the Ranger, there's the ColorBox, and there's the StazOn. I don't see a blue-black to it, but that's what Craft Test Dummies said. And they said that it was, it can also act as a resist when watercoloring. I'm not exactly sure what they meant by that, because I haven't found that to be the case. But I'm giving you what they said because I want to make sure you have the full range of what people talked about. I do want to go back to what we said for watercolors. Now, we talked about watercolor markers, and we talked about watercolor as far as pure watercolor. And for us, our watercolor markers, the Ranger Black Tie is the one that did the best with the water marker recommendation. And that was just oh, sorry, that's the Ranger Black Tie. Hold on, I gotta find that. That is the very first one we did, and I think it's fine. When we looked at it with all of these, you can see it didn't do anything with the water marker at all. So I think that as far as the water marker goes, you would want the Ranger Black Tie. As far as watercoloring, they said Ranger Archival, and that's not what we said. Our Ranger Archival, we said yes to watercoloring, but no to water markers. So then I guess they're calling it they're saying in the watercolor. We said all of these ones did great under watercolor, but that's not what they said. So we'll go to the other ones. We also thought that the Ranger Black Tie was good with watercolors, pure watercolors. The Simon Says Stamp Intense Black was good with it. The Versafine Onyx Black was good with it, as well as the Distress Black Soot, the StazOn, and the ColorBox all worked with pure watercolors. Now, again, this is from what we found when we did it, and I'm going to, again, you can see the watercolors on all of these, no problems, and the ones that did have problems, we marked which ones had problems. So, again, it's our decision over theirs, but you did it along with me. I did want to mention a couple more things. I kept calling this as Copic. Those are alcohol markers, and alcohol markers are any markers. It could be Spectrum Noirs, Sharpies, Bic Markets. It could be anything that has the word alcohol in it. But Copic is like the Mercedes of the alcohol markers, and so that's what the other websites referred to it as, so I wanted to make sure that I called it that as well. Although I did use a Sharpie, I called it a Copic, and I apologize for that because I probably confused you a little bit with that. The one other thing I wanted to tell you was this. StazOn is the only one that has a smell, and it smells like almonds. And some people don't like the smell of it, so I wanted to make sure I did mention that to you. And just so you were in the know on it. There was I went to one other website, and they said that the Memento and the Adirondack that we did not test were best for Copics. So that was one other website that gave us what was best for alcohol markers. But I think, you watched me do it, and this was what we came up with as far as what worked for us. I hope you enjoyed this. Well, at least I hope you learned something from it, that the papers don't necessarily make a difference. I think everything's stamped pretty consistently across the board on every paper. Now, we did not try blending, and oftentimes people will say, well, if you blend on Nina, you'll never blend on another kind of paper again. But as far as this is the cheapest, the Georgia Pacific, and this is the most expensive, the Nina, I think when you put them side by side, I don't really notice any difference in the coloring or the color of the black marker for the price. So again, I hope this was informative, and I'm sorry it was so long, but I didn't know how else to do it to include different papers and the different mediums that we're coloring with. And I hope you'll give this a thumbs up and subscribe. Please tell your friends about me on social media. I really, really appreciate it, and thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.